The Kryllic shrieked in agony as sharp stones shattered against its soft, furry hide, spattering its crimson blood across the Saurus Prime alleyway. Nobody on the Saurian homeworld, with its strict adherence to cold-hearted reptilian efficiency, gave a single shit about the injured animal's pitiful cries, except for one human. Derek Mason, a visiting 35-year-old Terran xenobiologist, was exploring the technologically advanced jungle capital to study the planet's unique life forms. But as he watched the Saurian children viciously attack the helpless cat-sized creature, something snapped inside him. Maybe it was the Kryllic's soulful, expressive eyes or its agonized whimpers that sounded so much like a terrestrial wounded puppy, or maybe it was just the casual, sadistic cruelty of the reptilian children's laughter as they brutalized the innocent furball. Whatever the reason, Derek found himself unable to coldly ignore the Kryllic's suffering like all the other Saurians. His mammalian protective instincts kicked into overdrive. He charged forward, scattering the rock-throwing monster children, and scooped up the badly bleeding Kryllic in his arms. As he carried the alien animal through the streets toward the Terran embassy, disgusted reptilian faces glared at him from all sides, sneering and grimacing as if he was parading a piece of feces. Derek glared right back, silently daring any of them to say shit. He had never before been so repulsed by an advanced spacefaring race. But Derek knew his work was just beginning. The Kryllic felt so soft and warm, trembling against his chest, its prehensile tail weakly curling around his arm. He could sense it fading, its vibrant emerald lifeblood pumping out, soaking his shirt. There were no Saurian veterinarians, no Kryllic protective services. If this innocent creature was going to survive the night, it would be because of the emergency alien medicine skills of one determined human from Earth. And Derek was damn sure going to give saving this precious alien fuzzball his absolute all, no matter how much the Saurians despised him for it. Derek hurried into the Terran embassy, his blood-stained shirt clinging wetly to his chest. The Kryllic squirmed weakly in his arms, mewling in pain. In the safety of his quarters, he gently lay the creature on a towel and grabbed his medkit. "Shh! It's okay, little buddy, I've got you," he whispered, cleaning the cuts with antiseptic spray. The Kryllic whined but held still as Derek wrapped soft bandages around its injuries. As he worked, Derek marveled at the animal's intelligence. Despite its trauma, it gazed around the room with keen interest, fluffy ears perked. Its long, prehensile tail uncurled to investigate a pen on the table. Derek smiled. "Curious little fella, aren't you? I think I'll call you Fuzzy." With Fuzzy stabilized, Derek opened his compute console and accessed the database. He needed to learn about this species if he was going to help it survive, but as he read the files, his heart sank. Kryllics were considered vermin by the Saurians, hated for their scavenging. Seen as unproductive pests, they had no legal protections. Open extermination was encouraged. "Ethan, it's Derek," he said into his comlink a minute later. "I need to ask you about the Kryllics." Dr. Reeves's voice crackled to life. "Don't tell me you brought one into the embassy." "It was badly injured, I had to help it, but I'm reading that Saurians despise them. Why?" Ethan sighed. "Kryllics don't fit into their cold-hearted utilitarian worldview. To Saurians, any creature that consumes resources without producing is worthless and should be destroyed." Jesus, so if they knew I rescued one, it would be a huge diplomatic incident. They'd accuse you of subverting their societal values. Derek, I know you want to help, but keeping that animal could jeopardize the entire Terran-Saurian relationship. Derek looked over at Fuzzy. The Kryllic had fallen asleep on the towel, its patched-up flank rising and falling peacefully. "I know the risks are high," he said into the comlink, "but I won't abandon Fuzzy. I'll just have to care for it in secret." As the days passed, Fuzzy's wounds healed under Derek's attentive care. The Kryllic grew more active, scampering around Derek's quarters with boundless energy. But what truly astounded Derek was Fuzzy's apparent intelligence. It started with a simple puzzle box Derek had bought to entertain the creature. He placed a treat inside and watched in amazement as Fuzzy methodically investigated the box, using its paws and tail to manipulate the mechanism until it popped open. Fuzzy chirped triumphantly, snatching the treat. Intrigued, Derek began presenting Fuzzy with increasingly complex puzzles. The Kryllik solved them all, often in mere minutes. Even more remarkably, Fuzzy seemed to be communicating with Derek, using a combination of chirps, trills, and gestures to indicate hunger, thirst, or a desire to play. Excited by these discoveries, Derek called Ethan over to his quarters. The two men watched in awe as Fuzzy demonstrated its problem-solving skills. "This is incredible," Ethan breathed. "I've never seen anything like it. But Derek, do you realize what this means? If the Saurians knew Krylliks were this intelligent, they'd have to rethink their whole exterminate the vermin policy," Derek finished. Ethan nodded. "We need proof. Indisputable evidence of Kryllik cognition that the Saurians can't ignore." Together, they transformed Derek's living room into a makeshift research lab. They designed tests to measure Fuzzy's memory, pattern recognition, and problem-solving abilities, rewarding the Kryllik with treats and lavish praise. As they worked side by side, Derek and Ethan forged a deep bond over their shared goal. They spent long hours discussing Kryllik behavior, marveling at Fuzzy's cleverness, and strategizing how best to present their findings to the Saurians. "You know," Derek said late one night, watching Fuzzy doze in its nest of blankets, "I never thought I'd end up risking my career for a fuzzball, but I can't stand by and let them keep slaughtering these amazing creatures." Ethan clasped his shoulder. "We're doing the right thing, and with the data we're collecting, we might actually have a chance to—" A sharp rap at the door interrupted him. Derek froze. Embassy staff never visited this late. Heart pounding, he cracked open the door to find Kaz Tok, the Saurian maintenance worker, standing in the hallway. The reptilian's eyes widened as he spotted Fuzzy. "What is the meaning of this?" Kaz Tok hissed. "You dare harbor a Kryllik in the Terran embassy?" "I can explain," Derek began, but Kaz Tok was already speaking rapidly into his wrist communicator. Within minutes, a squad of Saurian enforcers stormed the corridor, stun batons crackling with electricity. "Shit, shit, shit!" Derek shouted, slamming his fist against the wall as heavy boots pounded down the hallway toward his quarters. "They're coming for Fuzzy!" Ethan leapt into action, toppling Derek's desk and shoving it against the door. "Help me," he yelled. "We need to barricade ourselves in." Derek grabbed his dresser, grunting as he dragged it over. Fuzzy chirped in distress, darting under the bed. The two men piled every piece of heavy furniture against the entrance, hearts racing. Thunderous bangs shook the door. "Terran scum!" Zargok roared from the other side. "Surrender the Kryllik immediately!" "Fuck you!" Derek shouted back. "I won't let you murder an innocent creature." "I have no authority here, human," Zargok snarled. "The Kryllik is Saurian property. Release it or face the consequences." Ethan gripped Derek's arm, his face pale. "We can't hold them off for long. I'm calling the ambassador." As Ethan frantically explained the situation over his comlink, the Saurian enforcers rammed the door, the barricade shuddering under the impact. "He's on his way," Ethan said tersely, ending the call. "But Derek, if they break through before he arrives—" Derek clenched his jaw. "I won't let them take Fuzzy. I'll fight them with my bare fucking hands if I have to." Fuzzy poked its head out from under the bed, eyes wide with fear. Derek scooped up the trembling Kryllik, holding it close. "It's okay, little buddy," he murmured. "I won't let them hurt you." The furniture barrier jolted again, the door frame splintering. Derek and Ethan exchanged a desperate look. Just then a commanding voice rang out in the corridor. "Stand down, Enforcer Zargok." The pounding ceased. "Ambassador Novak," Zargok growled. "This is a Saurian matter. You have no right to interfere." "On the contrary," Ambassador Novak replied coolly. "Under the terms of our scientific exchange agreement, the Terrans have the right to study and protect any life forms we deem necessary for research purposes." "That agreement does not apply to Krylliks," Zargok spat. "They are vermin, not subjects of study." "That is for us to determine," Novak countered. "I must insist that you allow my scientists to continue their work unimpeded." As the ambassador and the enforcer argued, Ethan grabbed Derek's sleeve. "We need to prove Fuzzy's worth as a research subject," he whispered urgently, "and I think I know how." Ethan rushed to his computer console and began typing furiously. "I'm setting up a live stream to broadcast directly to the embassy network. If we can show everyone back on Earth what Fuzzy can do..." Derek's eyes widened. "They'll see that Krillix are intelligent, valuable creatures. Ethan, you're a genius." Working quickly, they arranged Fuzzy's puzzle boxes on the floor. Derek adjusted the console's camera to capture the scene. "Okay, buddy," Derek said, placing Fuzzy in front of the puzzles. "Time to show the universe what you can do." Fuzzy chirped, tail swishing. As the camera light blinked on and the live stream began, the little Krillix set to work, deftly manipulating the complex mechanisms with its paws. Outside, the shouting match continued. Ambassador Novak's measured tones clashing against Zargok's enraged bellows. But inside, a hush fell as Derek and Ethan watched Fuzzy solve puzzle after puzzle with astonishing speed and precision. "Look at that," Ethan breathed. "Fuzzy's not just intelligent, and it's a fucking prodigy." Derek nodded, a fierce pride swelling in his chest. "And now the whole Terran Confederacy will see it too." On the screen, messages from Earth began pouring in, scientists and citizens alike expressing shock and wonder at Fuzzy's abilities. Derek and Ethan shared a triumphant grin. But their elation was short-lived. With an ear-splitting crack, the door burst open, the barricade tumbling aside. Zargok stormed into the room, flanked by his squad of enforcers, their stun batons crackling with menace. As Zargok raised his stun baton, the comlink on his wrist chimed urgently. He snarled into it, reptilian eyes never leaving Derek and Ethan. "Sir," a voice crackled, "the High Council demands your presence immediately. There's a situation with the Krillix." Zargok's scales rippled with rage, but he lowered his weapon. "This isn't over, Terrans," he spat. "If the Council sides with you, it will be a dark day for Saurian tradition." He stormed out, enforcers trailing behind. Derek and Ethan sagged against the wall, adrenaline still pumping. On the screen, Fuzzy chirped triumphantly as it solved the final puzzle. "Holy shit," Ethan breathed, scrolling through the flood of messages. The live stream went viral. People back home are going nuts over Fuzzy. "Look at this," Derek said, pointing to a Saurian newsfeed. "Some of the younger Saurians are actually questioning the Krillix extermination policy. We're making a difference." Suddenly the console pinged with an incoming transmission. Derek accepted, and a female Saurian's face filled the screen. "Dr. Mason, Dr. Reeves," she said, "I am Lazari, a xenobiologist. I want to help you save the Krillix." Derek blinked in surprise. "How? Why?" "I've been studying Krillix cognition in secret for years," Lazari explained. "My father is Kazatok, the maintenance worker who reported you, but I don't share his views." She took a breath. "I have evidence that Krillix are as intelligent as some Saurian species. With my research and your live stream footage, we can prove to the High Council that they deserve protection." Derek and Ethan shared a look of disbelief and hope. "Send us everything you have," Derek said. "We'll put together a report for the Council." For hours they worked feverishly, compiling data, analyzing videos, and crafting arguments. Fuzzy dozed contentedly in Derek's lap as they typed. As dawn approached, Derek and Ethan presented their finished report to Ambassador Novak. The weary diplomat smiled. "Incredible work, gentlemen. I'll deliver this to the High Council at once." But as the ambassador departed, an enraged roar echoed through the embassy. Zargok burst into the room, flanked by a dozen heavily armed enforcers. "Enough of this farce," the enforcer bellowed. "By order of the High Councillor, I am authorized to terminate the Krillix immediately. Stand aside, Terrans." Derek leapt to his feet, shielding Fuzzy with his body. "No fucking way," he growled. "The Council is still deliberating. You can't do this." Zargok advanced, eyes blazing. "I can and I will. The Krillix dies now." The enforcers leveled their weapons, energy crackling. Derek tensed, ready to fight to the bitter end. This was it, the moment of truth. The fate of the Krillix and the future of Terran-Saurian relations hung in the balance. Just as Zargok raised his stun baton, energy crackling, a chime echoed through the embassy. The enforcer paused, scales rippling with irritation, and touched his wrist communicator. "Sir," a voice crackled, "the High Council has issued a stay on the enforcement action. They're demanding further investigation into the Terrans' claims about Krillic intelligence." Zargok's eyes blazed with fury, but he lowered his weapon. "You've bought yourselves a reprieve, Terrans," he spat, "but mark my words, the Council will see through your lies." He stormed out, enforcers trailing behind. Derek sagged against the wall, heart hammering. "Holy shit, that was close." "Too close," Ethan agreed, running a hand through his hair. "But we're not out of the woods yet. The Council is summoning us to present our findings in person." Lazari's face filled the console screen, and they've ordered a delegation of Saurian scientists to examine Fuzzy and conduct their own assessments. We need to prepare an airtight case. Over the next few days, the embassy buzzed with activity. Derek and Lazari pored over data, compiling evidence of Fuzzy's cognitive abilities. They worked side by side, so close their shoulders brushed, a thrill running through Derek every time Lazari's scales glinted in the light. "I never thought I'd meet a Saurian who cared about Krillix," he confessed late one night, bleary-eyed from staring at screens. Lazari smiled, her tail curling, "And I never thought a Terran would risk so much to save one." Ethan, meanwhile, rallied support among his scientific colleagues, urging them to speak out for the Krillix. "This isn't just about Fuzzy," he argued in impassioned comlink calls. "It's about the principles of compassion and conservation." But as the team prepared, tensions rose in the streets of Saurus Prime. Conservative Saurians, led by Zargok, staged protests, waving signs with slogans like "Exterminate the vermin" and "Productivity over pests." They argued that any concessions to the Krillix would undermine Saurian values of order and efficiency. In response, a smaller but vocal group of progressive Saurians held counter-demonstrations chanting, "Intelligence has rights and Fuzzy deserves justice." Riot police lined the streets, stun batons at the ready. The night before the presentation, Derek found Lazari on the embassy roof gazing at the twin moons. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice soft. "If we fail, Fuzzy will die. And the Krillix." Derek took her hand, smooth scales against his skin. "We won't fail, we can't. There's too much at stake." Lazari turned to him, eyes gleaming. "Thank you, Derek, for everything." The words caught in his throat. He leaned in, heart pounding, and brushed his lips against hers. For a moment the world fell away, and it was just the two of them under the stars. The next morning, Derek, Ethan, and Lazari stood before the Saurian High Council, a semicircle of stern-faced reptilians in flowing robes. Fuzzy chirped nervously in a reinforced cage, surrounded by a ring of Saurian scientists. In the gallery, Zargok glared daggers. The fate of a species hung in the balance. Derek squared his shoulders and stepped forward, data pad in hand. It was now or never. The eyes of two worlds were upon them. Derek squared his shoulders as he faced the stern Saurian High Council. The chamber buzzed with tension, the air thick with anticipation. Zargok glowered from the front row, his reptilian eyes smoldering with barely restrained hostility. Taking a deep breath, Derek launched into his presentation. He recounted his first meeting with Fuzzy, the Krillix's pitiful cries echoing in his mind. His voice grew stronger as he described Fuzzy's remarkable intelligence, showcasing video after video of the creature deftly solving intricate puzzles. "As you can see," Derek said, gesturing to the screens, "Fuzzy displays cognitive abilities far beyond what was previously believed possible for Krillix." Ethan stepped forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Our research indicates that Krillix possess a level of intelligence comparable to that of many Saurian species," he explained, clicking through slides packed with dense scientific data. "These creatures are capable of complex problem-solving, communication and social bonding." Lazari took the floor, her scales shimmering under the chamber's harsh lights. My own studies have revealed that Krillix have a rich social structure, she said, her voice ringing with conviction. They display empathy, cooperation, and even altruism, traits long thought to be unique to higher species. As the presentation drew to a close, the High Council members sat in stony silence, their expressions unreadable. Derek's heart hammered in his chest as he scanned their impassive faces, searching for any hint of sympathy or understanding. Zargok surged to his feet, his robes billowing around him. "This is preposterous," he snarled, jabbing an accusing finger at the Terrans. "These outsiders seek to undermine the very foundations of our society with their baseless claims and flimsy evidence." He whirled to face the council, his eyes blazing with righteous fury. "To acknowledge the intelligence of Krillix would be to unravel the very fabric of our civilization," he thundered. "These creatures are pests, nothing more. They must be exterminated for the good of all Saurians." The chamber erupted into chaos, shouts and jeers echoing off the high walls. Ambassador Novak leapt up, his face flushed with anger. "Esteemed members of the council," he called out, his voice cutting through the din, "I implore you to hear from your own citizens, those who have been moved by the Terran's evidence and Lazari's groundbreaking research." A hush fell over the room as a group of Saurians stepped forward, their eyes shining with determination. One by one they shared their stories, tales of Krillix displaying compassion, intelligence, and a zest for life that challenged everything they had been taught. "I once watched a Krillix share its meager food with a starving nestmate," a young female Saurian said, her voice trembling. "How can we condemn creatures capable of such selflessness?" As the testimonies continued, the tide of public opinion began to turn. Whispers of doubt and unease rippled through the Saurian observers, their long-held beliefs crumbling in the face of this new evidence. But Zargok and his allies would not be swayed. They surged forward, hurling insults and accusations at the Terrans and their Saurian supporters. The chamber descended into bedlam, shouts and snarls echoing off the ancient stone. Through it all the High Council remained silent, their faces cryptic and unreadable. Derek, Ethan, and Lazari exchanged tense glances, their hearts in their throats as they awaited the Council's judgment. The fate of Fuzzy, and the future of the Krillix, hung in the balance, the weight of two worlds bearing down upon them. Through it all the High Council remained silent, their faces cryptic and unreadable. Derek, Ethan, and Lazari exchanged tense glances, their hearts in their throats as they awaited the Council's judgment. The fate of Fuzzy, and the future of the Krillix, hung in the balance, the weight of two worlds bearing down upon them. After hours of intense deliberation behind closed doors, the ancient stone doors of the council chamber ground open. Zoraval, the chief counselor, emerged. His dark green scales gleamed dully under the harsh lights as he raised a clawed hand for silence. The chamber fell deathly quiet. "The Saurian High Council has reached a decision," Zoraval intoned, his voice an ancient croak. "In light of the evidence presented by the Terran delegation and their Saurian allies, this council hereby acknowledges the sentience of the Krillix species." Derek's heart leapt into his throat. He reached for Lazari's hand, squeezing tight. "Henceforth," Zoraval continued, "Krillix are to be granted the full rights and protections afforded to all sentient beings under Saurian law. The extermination of these creatures is to cease immediately." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Lazari let out a choked sob, her tail curling around Derek's leg. Ethan sagged against the wall, his face split in a grin. "Furthermore," Zoraval said, "a joint Saurian-Terran committee will be established to develop a comprehensive conservation plan for the Krillix. Their habitats are to be protected, their needs provided for." Fuzzy chirped from its cage as if it understood. Derek couldn't stop smiling. They had done it. They had won. But as cheers erupted from the Terran delegation, a snarl cut through the din. Zargok surged to his feet, eyes blazing with fury. "This is an outrage," he roared, "an insult to the Saurian way of life. The Council has betrayed our most sacred values." Zoraval fixed him with a frigid stare. "The decision is final, Enforcer Zargok. You are bound by law to uphold it." With an enraged hiss, Zargok spun on his heel and stormed from the chamber, his supporters trailing behind. The doors slammed shut with a boom. In the aftermath, a dazed Derek found himself engulfed in a sea of congratulations. Ambassador Novak pumped his hand, Terran scientists clapped him on the back, Saurian progressives embraced him. Lazari held him tight, her heart beating against his. "We did it," she whispered. "I can't believe we did it." Ethan appeared at his side, Fuzzy cradled in his arms. "You were incredible, man, both of you." He grinned at Lazari. "The three of us, we're going to change the galaxy." In the days that followed, Derek, Ethan, and Lazari found themselves thrust into the spotlight. Hailed as heroes by the Terran media and progressive Saurians, they became the faces of a new movement, a shining example of what Terran-Saurian cooperation could achieve. They gave interviews, spoke at rallies, met with leaders from both worlds to hash out the details of the Krillic Protection Act. Slowly but surely, Saurian public opinion began to shift. More and more voices spoke out in support of the Krillics, in favor of a new era of compassion and unity. But not everyone celebrated the change. Reports began to trickle in of resistance, of rogue Saurian factions lashing out against the new order, Krillic habitats vandalized, Saurian progressives harassed and threatened. Then came the first attack. A prominent Saurian advocate kidnapped from her home in the dead of night. The next day, a Krillic sanctuary burned to the ground, the creatures inside left to die in the flames. Derek, Ethan, and Lazari gathered around a display screen in the embassy, watching in horror as the news poured in. Grainy security footage showed masked Saurian figures, armed with energy weapons, setting fire to the sanctuary. Krillic screams echoed over the speakers. "This is Zargok's doing," Lazari whispered, her scales ashen. "He's trying to undo everything we've accomplished." Derek slammed his fist against the wall, grief and rage twisting in his gut. After all they had fought for, all they had sacrificed, to see it torn apart like this. "We have to stop him," he growled. "We can't let him destroy the future we've built." Ethan nodded grimly, his jaw set. "The Council has authorized us to lead the investigation. We'll hunt down Zargok and his followers, bring them to justice." Lazari raised her head, her eyes hardening with resolve. "We'll show them that the Krillics are here to stay, that compassion and unity will always triumph over hatred and fear." Derek reached out, gripping his friend's hands. "Together," he said softly. "We'll do this together for the Krillics, for the future." As they stepped out into the Saurian sunlight, ready to face the challenges ahead, Fuzzy chirped from its perch on Derek's shoulder, a reminder of all they had achieved and all they still had to fight for. The battle for the soul of Saris Prime had only just begun. In the aftermath of the Saurian High Council's ruling, the streets of Saris Prime erupted in violence. Zargok's supporters, enraged by what they saw as a betrayal of their way of life, lashed out at Krillic populations and their defenders with brutal force. Derek, Lazari, and Ethan watched in horror as reports of burned Krillic habitats and abducted advocates flooded the news feeds. The Council, recognizing the severity of the situation, moved swiftly to authorize the creation of a special task force to investigate and apprehend those responsible. The task force, handpicked by the Council, assembled in a secure chamber deep within the government complex. At its head stood Kazrik, a battle-hardened Saurian enforcer with a reputation for relentless pursuit of justice. His piercing eyes scanned the room, taking in the mix of Saurian and Terran faces. "The attacks on the Krillics are not random acts of violence," Kazrik growled, his deep voice commanding attention. "They are coordinated, deliberate, and we will root out those responsible." Derek and Lazari, appointed as key advisors to the task force, shared a look of grim determination. They had fought too hard for the Krillics' rights to let Zargok's followers destroy everything. As the task force delved into the investigation, a disturbing pattern emerged. Encrypted communications, intercepted by Saurian intelligence, hinted at the existence of an underground network dedicated to the eradication of the Krillics and the overthrow of the High Council itself. They call themselves the Saurian Liberation Front, Kazrik informed the team, his claws tapping at a holographic display of the network's suspected structure. And they are recruiting from every level of our society. Derek leaned forward, studying the web of connections. High-ranking officials, business leaders, even members of the security forces, he murmured, his brow furrowed. Zargok has been busy. Lazari's tail twitched with agitation. We need to infiltrate their network, gather intelligence on their plans before they can strike again. Kazrik nodded, his scales glinting under the chamber's lights. Agreed, and I have a plan. The enforcer's gaze settled on Derek, a calculating look in his eyes. You, Terran, your unique perspective as a human, your knowledge of Krillic behavior, they make you the ideal candidate to go undercover, to pose as a sympathizer to the SLF's cause. Derek's heart raced at the prospect, a mix of fear and determination coursing through his veins. He glanced at Lazari, saw the conflict in her eyes, the desire to protect him, warring with the knowledge that he was their best chance. I'll do it, Derek said, his voice steady. I'll infiltrate the SLF. Lazari's hand found his under the table, her scales cool against his skin. I'll be with you every step of the way, she whispered. From the outside, I'll support you. As the meeting adjourned, and the task force members dispersed to their assignments, Derek lingered in the chamber, his mind racing with the challenges ahead. He thought of Fuzzy, safe in a secure enclosure at the Terran embassy, and his resolve hardened. He would do whatever it took to protect the Krillics, to bring Zargok and his followers to justice. In the days that followed, Derek immersed himself in the world of the SLF, posing as a disgruntled Terran diplomat, sympathetic to their cause. He frequented the seedy bars and back alleys where the group's members were known to gather, dropping hints of his dissatisfaction with the Council's ruling. It wasn't long before he caught the attention of a high-ranking SLF operative, a scarred Saurian with a missing eye named Zorgak. In a dimly lit booth at the back of a dingy tavern, Zorgak probed Derek's motives, his one good eye gleaming with suspicion. Why would a Terran support our cause, he rasped, his claws drumming on the table. Your kind fought for the Krillic's rights. Derek leaned back, his heart pounding but his expression carefully neutral. Not all of us agreed with that decision, he lied smoothly. Some of us see the Krillics for what they are, a threat to the natural order, and the Council's ruling is a betrayal of Saurian sovereignty. Zorgak studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Perhaps you are not like the others, he conceded. Perhaps you have a place in our movement. And with that, Derek was welcomed into the shadowy world of the SLF. He attended clandestine meetings in abandoned warehouses, listened as Zargok's lieutenants railed against the Council, and plotted their next moves against the Krillics. But as he delved deeper into the organization, a chilling realization began to dawn on him. The SLF's plans extended far beyond the persecution of the Krillics. They were plotting something much larger, much more sinister. In hushed conversations overheard in darkened corners, Derek learned of a planned attack on the Saurian capital itself, a coordinated strike designed to destabilize the government and allow the SLF to seize power in the chaos. The scale of the plot left him reeling, his mind racing with the implications. He had to get this information to Lazari and the task force, had to find a way to stop the SLF before it was too late. But as he made his way back to the Terran embassy, his heart heavy with the weight of his discovery, Derek couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The streets seemed too quiet, the shadows too deep. He quickened his pace, his hand drifting to the concealed blaster at his hip. Just a few more blocks and he'd be safe, back in the familiar confines of the embassy. But he never made it that far. As he turned down a narrow alley, a figure stepped out from the darkness, a stun baton crackling in its hand. "Going somewhere, Terran?" Zorgak hissed, his ruined face twisted in a sneer. "I think it's time we had a little chat about loyalty." Derek's heart seized in his chest as more shadows detached from the walls, surrounding him on all sides. He drew his blaster, but it was too late. A jolt of electricity surged through his body, and the world went black. Derek blinked groggily, pain pulsing through his skull as consciousness returned. He found himself bound to a chair in a dank, dimly lit room, the stench of mold and rust thick in the air. Zargok loomed over him, a cruel sneer twisting his scarred face. "I thought you could deceive us, Terran," the Saurian snarled, his hot breath washing over Derek's face. "Thought you could infiltrate our ranks and sabotage our righteous cause?" Derek spat blood, glaring up at his captor. "Your cause is murder and oppression. You're nothing but a bunch of xenophobic thugs." Zargok's fist slammed into Derek's jaw, snapping his head back. Stars exploded across his vision as pain lanced through his face. "Where is the task force?" Zargok demanded, seizing Derek by the hair and wrenching his head up. "What do they know of our plans?" Derek locked his jaw, tasting copper on his tongue. He thought of Lazari, of Ethan, of all the innocent Krillix counting on him. He wouldn't betray them, no matter the cost. Zargok's eyes flashed with rage. He reached for a wicked-looking blade, its edge glinting in the low light. "Perhaps this will loosen your tongue," he hissed, pressing the cold steel against Derek's throat. Just then, a commotion erupted outside the room. Shouts, gunfire, the thud of bodies hitting the ground. Zargok whirled, his scales rippling with tension. The door burst open, and Lazari charged in, her blaster leveled at Zargok's chest. Task Force agents swarmed in behind her, weapons drawn. "Step away from him," Lazari commanded, her voice hard as steel. Zargok snarled, pressing the knife harder against Derek's throat. A hot trickle of blood ran down his neck. "Drop it," Lazari shouted. In a blur of motion, Zargok hurled the knife at Lazari. She dodged, the blade missing her by inches. Zargok lunged for a hidden panel in the wall. "Stop him!" Lazari yelled. But it was too late. Zargok slammed his fist against the panel, and a hidden door slid open. He dove through, disappearing into a dark tunnel. The task force agents surged after him, but he was gone. Lazari rushed to Derek, her hands shaking as she cut his bonds. "Derek, are you all right?" He stood on unsteady legs, leaning heavily on her. "I'll live," he managed. "Fuzzy, they have Fuzzy." Lazari gripped his arm, her eyes fierce. "We'll find him, I promise." Together, they stumbled from the interrogation room, joining the task force agents as they secured the SLF's headquarters. Weapons, data drives, and incriminating documents were seized as the remaining SLF leaders were cuffed and led away. But there was no sign of Fuzzy. Derek's heart clenched with dread. "Over here," an agent called. "We've got a Krillix." Derek and Lazari raced over, hope surging in their chests. But as they approached, their steps faltered. Fuzzy lay on the ground, his soft fur matted with blood. His small body was still, his usually vibrant eyes glazed and lifeless. "No," Derek whispered, dropping to his knees beside his friend. "No, Fuzzy, no." Lazari knelt beside him, her own eyes brimming with tears. She reached out, gently stroking Fuzzy's fur. "He's gone, Derek," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." Derek gathered Fuzzy's limp form into his arms, cradling him against his chest. Sobs racked his body as he rocked back and forth, his tears soaking into Fuzzy's fur. Around them, the task force agents bowed their heads in somber respect. In the face of their victory, a profound sense of loss settled over them all. Fuzzy, the brave little Krillix who had started it all, who had opened their eyes to the truth and brought them together, was gone. But his legacy, they knew, would live on. In the days that followed, the Saurian High Council convened a special session to honor the task force and commemorate Fuzzy's sacrifice. Derek and Lazari stood hand in hand as the chief counselor spoke of bravery, compassion, and the unbreakable bonds of friendship. "Let this be a turning point for our people," Zorval declared, his aged voice ringing through the chamber. "Let us learn from the courage and wisdom of our Terran friends and from the gentle spirit of the Krillix." Medals were presented, accolades bestowed. But for Derek and Lazari, the true honor was in knowing that Fuzzy's dream of a better world for his kind would not die with him. As they walked out into the Saurian sunlight, a group of young Saurians approached them. Their eyes shone with hope and determination. "We want to learn more about the Krillix," their leader said, her voice strong and clear. "We want to help protect them as you have. Will you teach us?" Derek and Lazari shared a look, a bittersweet smile passing between them. In the faces of these young Saurians, they saw the promise of a brighter future, a future Fuzzy had given everything to make possible. "Yes," Derek said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, we will teach you for Fuzzy." And so, as the twin suns of Saurus Prime dipped toward the horizon, a new chapter began. A chapter of hope, of healing, and of the enduring power of a small, brave creature who had changed the course of two worlds. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.